Hello, everyone. Good evening. For some reason, my screen says it's paused. Let's hit this button and see what happens. Jackie, do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I don't know why it says it's paused, but here we are. Good, good evening, everyone. Bienvenue à notre soirée de séminaire de web de Rugby Canada. Welcome, everybody, and thanks once again for joining us. Tonight, we are going to have a very, very enthusiastic, although I was going to use the word geeky, but we'll get to why in a moment, but it's a great topic of conversation with a few of our guests. So I will get to introducing them in a moment. But first, I would like to say, once again, thanks for joining us. We are very excited at Rugby Canada, as well as with our provincial bodies as we get ready for return to play. I know there's been a lot of desire out there. We just finished a national survey and collated our responses from this past weekend. So thank you for everyone who participated in that. There is some very useful information that came from that should be implemented and has also just kind of reinforced where we were going with most of our return to play pieces. But suffice to say that we're not quite there yet. So we're still under rugby suspension, but we are almost there. And we're hoping that the updates that Rugby Canada and the provincial unions have provided are giving people a bit of a sense of what our timelines are, but we will have something for you before the end of the month. So thank you for your patience. And we are just as excited to get back to rugby as all of you are. So moving on to tonight, real quick, how to use GoToWebinar. On your control panel, you should have a questions box. Feel free to type your questions in there in English or in French. I'll be happy to translate for our panelists. And if it's in French for Jackie, I might just challenge her to answer in French, which would be great.
Ça va.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll do the same for Andy and Beth. So a real quick introduction. Tonight's topic of conversation, professional development, formal, informal, and maintenance of certification is going to be presented by Beth Barz, who is a former national age grade coach as well as varsity coach with Queen's University and is now one of our lead World Rugby trainers who helps oversee our training and education from a delivery standpoint. And very excited to have Beth on, also a coaching geek, hence one of the geeks on the show tonight. Andy Plimer, very much the same as Beth, former national age grade coach, also still coaching at the SAGEP level, correct, Andy?
No, with Concordia women's team.
Concordia women, I knew that.
Yeah, assistant coach.
I knew that, with Joss Berrio.
Hence the shirt.
That's right, exactly, thank you. And
Powers of observation.
Yeah, I know. Well, I can't see anyone right now, which is unfortunate.
Oh,
but I'll
right.
And also a coaching geek and leader of or designer voice of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. So he'll get into a little bit of that. And then finally, Jackie Tittley, just joining us about 2.5 months ago at Rugby Canada as our new training and education manager, who comes from the Coaching Association of Canada, having done a ton of certification and maintenance of certification over the last few years, and then coaches at her local Barrhaven Scottish Club, and also a coaching geek. So everyone gets to enjoy a lot of technical and non-technical and fun rugby coaching stuff tonight, and it's going to be great. And then the best commentary that people have for either my hair or Jackie's faux black polo shirt get bonus points on their transcript at the end of this. So without further ado, Beth Barz, you're leading us off tonight.
Awesome. We're going to flip to that slide.
Oh, sorry, real quick, our agenda tonight. Beth is going to chat about what the research says. Jackie will talk about formal and non-formal PD and policy. And then Andy Plimer will give us a little bit of his journey into informal PD. So we'll go through all of these little pieces together. Sorry, Beth, here you go.
Awesome. Did you just make me presenter, or are you going to flip the slides?
I'm going to flip the slides, kid. You just tell me when to go.
Can you go to slide 4 then?
You bet.
You're still in the first one.
Oh, am I?
Yep.
Yeah, see, this is my problem here. Is it saying it's paused? Let's do this. Let's escape. There we go. I'm glad we
Excellent.
ID'd that.
I
All
just
right, let's hit
figured
play
it'd be
again.
hard to talk about a diagram when it's not in front of people. So
Here's the bizarre thing. I've never had this happen before. Okay, I'm just
maybe
gonna
it's
try.
because Jackie's on the call. She's messing
Yeah.
everything up.
No,
But
it's
the purple
Because I'm
shirt.
not hosting.
as soon as I hit play on this PowerPoint, I've never had this happen before, and then it just says it's paused on
Do you want
the.
to make me presenter, and then I'll just put this onto my desktop?
That might. I don't know if that's gonna work. Let me try one more thing here.
Sure.
Okay, how's that?
Wait for it.
There we go.
Let's see, agenda. Next one. Yeah. Hey.
Ew.
Winner. Here we go. Off you go,
All right,
Beth.
winner,
Sorry
winner,
about that.
chicken dinner. Hey, no worries, it's all good. Folks, thanks for joining tonight. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what the research says about coaching in general and types of learning situations. So what you can see in front of you here is just a small little diagram explaining the difference between some of the language that's being used when we talk about learning in general for coaches. So mediated learning is on the left-hand side there, the idea of formal and non-formal learning. So what Jackie is doing for us at Rugby Canada and was doing at the CIC was looking after coaching certifications. So NCCP, National Coaching and Certification Program, World Rugby, and both of those are usually underscored by competencies. So meaning things that you can do as a coach and where you demonstrate competency at doing them. And then some are actually even linked with degrees and that kind of thing as well. So that's really formal learning in a nutshell. Then there's non-formal learning that supports the formal learning, and it's usually run basically it's we're helped to learn through other people or materials. So we might have somebody who's running a clinic or delivering a webinar like this tonight, or could be running a seminar or other workshops, and even mentoring kind of fits in as well. So mentoring is a big piece that a lot of coaches are looking for. On the right-hand side, we have the idea of unmediated learning. So the fact that nobody else is telling you as a coach how to learn. The idea of informal learning is all about you and figuring out what you want to learn. Sometimes it's in the moment, sometimes it's on the job and you didn't realize you needed to know it. But you need to realize in that moment it's important to learn. And also probably the most important part that I think is most important from a personal perspective as well as a research perspective is the idea of reflection, self-reflection, and reflecting with other coaches and with other people, and even people outside of sport can still help us to grow as coaches in general. So both of those are. All of this is coming from a couple of researchers, Moon in 2004, and then you can see at the bottom right-hand corner it says ICCE, so that's the International Coaching Center for Coaching Excellence, and they have a ton of great information and lots of research-based stuff that comes out as well. You can go to the next one there, Nathan. Maybe. There it is. So this next slide is just looking at the difference between just-in-time and just-in-case learning. And most coaches are learning for one of these two reasons. One being just in case you're kind of interested and you might need to use the learning that you're gaining or doing at some point. It's sort of an umbrella kind of idea, and it's for the longer term. We have some ideas of just in time as kind of thinking, well, I might need to use this at some point, or I think it could be generally applicable and helpful at times. The other piece is just in time. So you as a coach think, I have this problem, I haven't had to deal with it before, or it's a problem that it's a slightly new twist on a problem that maybe I've had before, but I have to maybe look at some other factors. So we're looking for very specific learning that you probably need even maybe yesterday, if not today. And the idea of learning just in time is something that we're trying to address, and realizing that coaches need a little bit of both. So just in case learning is not going to cover it for everyone. So just because we've signed up for a course next week or next weekend, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's necessarily linking to exactly what you as a coach desires or need. You can go to the next one there. Thanks. So the next two slides are just focusing on the study that we did a few years ago. It was for my master's thesis with Canadian rugby coaches. So we looked at this in 2018, and 245 coaches from coast to coast answered a survey, and then several people, I think about 67, responded to a follow-up interview as well. And what we were looking for there is looking at the difference, or looking at how do we support coaches professionally, and how do we also encourage more acceptance of some of the formal learning that we're looking for and trying to support coaches with. So there were 7 findings. You can have a look there. The biggest one, I think, and the most important, is the top finding, which is the idea that everybody really was on board, and it was, I think, 88% of the coaches that answered the survey said that professional development was important. So there's a huge will and a huge understanding from the idea of coaches in Canada specifically, recognizing that PD is important and is going to be something that helps them be better coaches and helps them get better outcomes for their athletes as well. What we're looking for here is a couple of other pieces too. The collaboration piece, which is why we're on a webinar, right? We want to collaborate and learn from other people. And then you'll notice point number 6, talking about the what of coaching, having credible facilitators and activity-based PD. So people didn't want to just be talked at in a classroom. They wanted to be actively participating, and they wanted to be learning and trying. And even if it was difficult or tough, or maybe they failed the first time, they were willing to give it a go because they knew that ultimately the PD that they were involved in was going to benefit them overall. And finally, the last piece, I'll just share with you the conclusions of the study on the next slide. What we were looking at there is there are 4 main conclusions. Oop, where did they go? There we are. So the big idea here wasn't necessarily just to Rugby Canada, but also other sport organizations. The idea of lots of variety, sharing information as early and as often as possible, and also using a central repository. We kind of have that with Rugby Canada right now, the training.ca website, but I know there's a will to continue to make that better and support coaches even more so than we already are. Then the next piece was the idea of having a specific time and place for learning and being able to access learning when needed for that just-in-time type learning. Next one was the context specific, or support that was specific to a coach. So, not all coaches need everything all at the same time for the same reasons. So we all have different contexts. We're coaching under 8, we're coaching all the way up to university, club, all over the place. And lots of people are coaching high school, and even in the high school sense, we have very different programs and very different needs at times. So looking at the support that's specific for that was also important. And finally, the last piece was looking at the what and the how of coaching. So what to teach, the idea of skills, and making sure that we're teaching things correctly or right. And then the other piece was the idea of how. So are we using games? Are we being transformational coaches? And are we doing all those things that will benefit our athletes, not just as rugby players, but also as human beings as well? And that's it for what I've got to share tonight.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Beth. I apologize. I'm really not sure why I'm having some issues, because I was hitting next slide before you were asking me to, and I think there's just a bit of a delay because
no worries.
You're seeing it a little bit later. But anyways, we're gonna get there. We will get there tonight. No questions at the moment, folks. Please feel free as we go on to add any questions to the conversation. And then Jackie and Andy, if you guys have any further questions to what Beth was just talking about, there might be some points that we want to share as a group. However, in the meantime, Jackie, feel free to indicate that you're ready to go, and I will move on to the next slide.
Let's do it.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you. So I'll really be touching on that formal and non-formal piece that that Beth alluded to in the research. Also, comme Nathan a dit, n'hésitez pas de poser vos questions en français si vous voulez. I'm happy to answer questions in English or in French, so please don't hesitate as I go through. The phrase that's on the slide right now is really what I like to use as a bit of an overview of how to look at professional development. And it's really set up by a philosophy of lifelong learning. You know, if anyone's ever heard of growth mindset from Carol Dweck, it's really that that mindset of continuous education, always wanting to learn, always wanting to improve. And that leads to professional development. So that's development in a specific area. And here we're talking about specifically in the area of coaching rugby. And then finally, maintenance of certification is really the policy that formalizes that process. And the National Coaching Certification is the partnership that Rugby Canada belongs to that created that policy that we adhere to, at least on the coaching side. And I know, you know, Nathan and I have spoken about how eventually something like this will apply to our match officials as well. We've already started looking at, you know, keeping them up to date on based on their activity or active refereeing every year. So so we'll be looking at that applying to referees as well. The table that you see in front of you right now is, you know, complicated policy speak for the different areas of professional development that exist out there, and really how we categorize them. But more importantly and more, I think, relevant for yourselves is the information on the next slide, which are some examples of what kind of professional development, some examples of what each of these categories are. So if we look at something like we have a few sport logos on here: Wrestling Canada, Hockey Canada, Gymnastics. Some coaches have looked at, you know, wrestling as some good cross training. You know, there are definitely some skills in the takedown that are very useful in coaching the contact area. So, for example, as a coach, you could go and take an introduction to wrestling or to coaching wrestling course, and that would be considered professional development for you. Certainly, if it's an NCCP course, then that's recognized and tracked in the system. So similarly, across any NCCP sport, that's recognized professional development for you. Rugby Canada, we also offer specific, if we can just go back to the next slide, Nathan, we also offer specific professional development for rugby coaches. Our national key themes workshops that have not, we'll say, have not been offered consistently across the country over the last few years, but certainly something that that we want to look at promoting a little bit more in the future. World Rugby, we also are very fortunate to have a fantastic international federation that provides us with lots of resources, including things like the Activate program. Participating in that workshop or those webinars, or these webinars for that matter, is considered sport-specific professional development. And finally, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner the Safe Sport module that's recently been released by the Coaching Association of Canada is NCCP professional development. It's considered multi-sport because it's not catered to a specific sport, but it's an incredibly important piece in sport development in Canada. And so I would encourage everyone to take a look at that module that's available for free in English and French. So lots out there if you know where to look for them. And so certainly I'm here to help with that. And a little bit later on, I'll volunteer my email address and hopefully, well, maybe hopefully get bombarded, because we do want coaches to be involved in professional development. So we can skip to the next slide there, Nathan. Thank you. And finally, the maintenance of certification piece, like I said, is really the formality behind all of this. and really hoping that eventually we can foster an environment where there's lots of opportunity for rugby coaches to engage in professional development. And so it's not, it's not the stick. The maintenance certification policy isn't a hoop to jump through. It's a formalization of the professional development process that really recognizes coaches for activities that they're already engaged in. Like your active coaching and like the conferences that you attend and the online learning that you engage in. And so maintenance of certification specifically requires that coaches participate in a certain amount of professional development over a given period of time in order to maintain obviously that status. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just show a little bit what that looks like. Everything is tracked on the locker, which can be found at coach.ca. And if we go through this, you'll see based on a certification that you achieve, there are a certain amount of points that you must complete within a given period of time. So here we see January 2019 to January 2024. So for rugby coaches in Canada, you have a 5-year period to complete a certain amount of points based on your level of certification. And all of those activities that lend to the completion of these points, they're all tracked on your locker account as well. So you can go in there and take a look and see what you've been completed and what has contributed to your maintenance thus far. And I won't dive too much more into maintenance and certification. It can certainly be a rabbit hole if you let yourself go down it. But on the other hand, it is as simple as engaging in a lot of the activities that you already participate in. So again, happy to answer any more questions to clarify any of those maintenance or professional development pieces. But those are really the formal and non-formal opportunities that exist out there for coaches.
Awesome, thanks, Jackie. And just to update people on the match official side of things, Jackie's correct. We are working with her, but to help us along the way. But the primary work is going to be on just standardizing our recertification of level 1s across Canada, the more align more and reflect what our national kind of policy around coaching is, in order to try and make sure that we get some alignment and we can track actual refereeing activity, as opposed to just having people retake a level 1 course every 4 years. So some work is being done on that, but thank you, Jackie, for the update. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. One is, do you have to upload your certificate to both profiles? And I'm assuming that means both at the locker and on the Rugby Canada training profile. So it's just about what the difference is between the two, and
Sure.
and how an individual needs to maintain their profile on one or both sites.
Sure, that's a great question. Typically, any activity that you engage in is recorded to the locker for you by the organization that hosted. So, for example, Rugby Canada, we are hosting these webinars. We're taking in attendance lists, and eventually we'll ensure that those participant lists get uploaded to the locker. And so you as a participant don't need to worry about uploading something to your locker account. We don't track professional development on the training.rugby.ca website, so that's not a place where you would go to look at or upload any kind of professional development. It's all tracked centrally on the locker. On the locker, you can do things like declare active coaching, so you get 1 point per year for just actively being a coach. And you can also self-declare a certain amount of self-directed professional development, because we do recognize that there's a lot of informal PD that coaches participate in that Andy will talk about shortly. And so there are a certain amount of points that you can just say, I read this really good book on leadership and it really contributed to evolving my coaching practices, for example. But everything is on the locker, and most things are recorded by the organization that hosts them.
You're on mute.
Yeah, he's
You're right.
Nathan, I think you're on mute.
Hey, there we go. Sorry about that.
There you
Thanks, thanks,
Thanks,
Andy.
Andy. I thought it was me. Oof.
Barbara, I hope that answers your question. Please feel free to add a follow-up in there. John has a question for both Beth and Jackie. As we continue to grow participation at minor and junior level and bring in volunteer coaches, how can we encourage those individuals to take on board informal learning on the how of coaching?
Ooh. Beth, do you want to go first, or do you want?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is often we're getting people who are coming in a club setting, and one of the things that we can do is to have a technical director at a club, or have perhaps a senior level coach, or someone that people respect and is willing to embrace some new things, and really bring that kind of culture of learning to the club, recognizing that new people are generally pretty motivated to learn because they recognize that there's not a lot that they do know, and they're ready to learn. So I would rather work with a brand new coach who really doesn't know a ton just yet, right off the bat, and help them to learn from there, rather than working with someone who's been doing it for a while and kind of feels like they've got it figured out, when we know that the reality is, I'm 25 years into coaching, and man, I still got lots to learn. So, and like Nathan said, I'm a bit of a coaching geek, and I think we all are here, right? So, the more we recognize that there is more to learn, I think the better we get. So, just instilling that culture, and maybe having a person who's really trying to drive that for the club.
I love that culture piece, Beth, and I know Plimer will have a little bit to say on that as well, so I'll park it. But for me, that seems to resonate really well with what I see around coaches that really look to enhance that learning are those that truly believe in that mindset of there's always something out there that's new, right?
100%, yeah.
Jackie, did you want to add anything to that?
Beth captured it perfectly, so I'll park any other comments because I want to hear from Andy. So
no, perfect. Okay, there is a pertinent question from Martin, but we will have time at the end, so I'm going to come back to you, Jackie, for Martin. But in the meantime, Plimer, we're on to you, my friend.
All right, let's do it. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Nathan and Jackie for hosting these webinars. I think it's been a tough few months, but one of the positives that's come out of it is that we're getting access to these kind of resources. So awesome work to you guys, and to anyone else behind the scenes who's been doing it. It's really necessary, and long may it last. So thank you. A little bit about me. I have a Bachelor Ed in Phys Ed. I have a World Rugby Level 3. Prizes at the end to work out which one took the longest. 2 modules left on my NCCP Comp Dev. I'm from Australia originally. I grew up playing rugby league and then switched to rugby union when I was at university. And I can remember like it's yesterday, in my mid-20s, wondering who would ever want to be a coach. And now it's all I think of, apart from my wife and kids, and whether my home brew is going to make it through bottling and all that kind of stuff. But most of my bandwidth is filled up with coaching. And I'm Canadian developed. I've been here for 13 years. 95% of my coaching has been done in Canada. So, that's something I'm really proud of. So yeah, let's kick on there, Nathan. So the podcast, the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast, I started that initially. I was working at a high school, and I was teaching in the weight room a lot of the time, and I was just listening to a lot of strength and conditioning podcasts to supplement or to complement my knowledge. And then I started searching around for some rugby coaching podcasts, and I realized that there were some great podcasts out there that were more chat orientated and nothing specifically geared for rugby. So I decided to do it myself, and in the summer of 2015, I researched the process. It's pretty in-depth, and then I released my first batch of 4 episodes just before the 2015 Rugby World Cup. So it's been going for about 4.5 years now, and I'm getting up to 75,000 downloads a year. So that kind of goes to what Beth was saying, that there's a hunger for information out there. People want to get better as coaches, and there's multiple ways we can do it. And for me personally, it's hands down been the best informal professional development I could have hoped for. So next slide, please, Nathan. Thanks. So 4.5 years, 85. I just did my 85th episode. There's been some reoccurring themes that have been coming up, and I just wanted to share that with coaches for their own development. A lot of it will be old, some of it will be new, but just to give you a bit of an insight on what you can do if you start, turning over a few rocks and looking under them outside of what you normally do as a coach. So the first one is your coaching philosophy. Do you have one? Do you have one written down? I was saying when we were practicing for this presentation, this was the stuff that I'd fall asleep in lectures at university and coaching courses. But now I find this is key for me. I don't know if you necessarily have to have it written down, framed above your bed head or anything like that, but you need to have an understanding of why you're doing it. What are your processes? How are you doing it? How are you delivering your sessions? And then what are your values and ideals? Some of those things will change, some of them won't, but you've got to look at it as it's constantly growing and evolving. Does it also match your delivery? So are you doing what you say you are doing at practice and on game day in terms of your philosophy? Is your philosophy centered around the players? I know in my early days of coaching, mine wasn't. So how is that with you as a coach, and has that evolved? And then one thing that comes up a lot in interviews is connecting with players, not just what they're doing on the rugby field, but what are they doing off the field? Do you know their names? Do you know where they're from? Do you know what they do for a part-time job or full-time job or university degree? All really important and encompassed in that coaching philosophy piece. So next slide, please. Number 2, make it fun. And I believe no matter what age level you are at, you are playing a game, so it should be fun. So if you're a national team or you're an under-8s, it should be fun. I kind of look at it as I want my practice sessions to be the funnest hour and a half they've had in that day. We don't know where our athletes are coming from. They might have had their worst experience at work that week, or they've had a breakup, or they've got some kind of things going on in their life, and they're coming to see you for escape, and you've got to bring that energy as a coach. You've got to be leading that. Also, what does fun look like? Is what you think is fun what your athletes think is fun? So tying those two together is really important. I also think just the playing style needs to be fun. So I've put allow for risks in inverted commas there. I just think it's playing rugby. But things like offload, incorporating a kicking game, looking at defenses actually being attacked without the ball, that you're trying to get the ball back so that you can have fun and score points. Those kind of philosophies around your game is really important. Is your program athlete-centered? It's way more fun if the athletes are in control. And you're facilitating. And then are your practices primarily games based? All the research says that the enjoyment of the athletes is tied to a games based approach. All right, thanks, Nathan. This guy, he knows what he's talking about. I think he's the best coach in the world. And this is a great little bit about him in terms of when he started becoming a games-based athlete-centered coach, teaching games for understanding, those kind of things, and how it was a real cultural change for a lot of coaches, and people were wrestling with that idea. So I think if Wayne Smith says, that his most successful experience have been around athlete-centered programs and coaching through games, that's something we can think about. I haven't interviewed him yet though, but fingers crossed. All right, next one. Thanks, mate.
I'm looking forward to that one when you get to it, Plimer.
I can't wait. I'll have to control myself, I think. Don't want to be too fanboy. All right, research the science of coaching. This is the geeky stuff that I really love, and all the coaches on this panel would love, and a lot of people listening to it will love. This is a webinar in itself, and it would need to be delivered by someone more competent than myself in that area. But that doesn't mean as a coach you can't be exploring these concepts and ideas. So are you as a coach looking into the science that is pretty strong around things like decision making and skill acquisition, and how we can create an environment that's best for the acceleration of that in our athletes? We need to be thinking about things like perception action coupling, dynamical system theory, constraints-led approach, implicit learning, and blocked versus random practice. They're all really key things that when we think about practice design, what we need to be, keeping in the back of our mind constantly. Then there's the language we use as well when we're coaching skills and decision making. Are our cues internal or external? The science says external cue is going to really expedite skill acquisition, so something to think about there. And then also the use of analogies and other language. Can we say something really powerfully and on point in 3 words rather than 30? And that's challenging for coaches because we're so passionate about the game. We want to talk about it, we want to explain it. But if we look at the science, it's actually, if you've got some key words, some analogies, that's a more powerful method of skill acquisition. Next slide. Coach the principles of play. I start with this now. I probably never even addressed it in my early years of coaching, but this is my very first session with any team will be geared around the principles of play. You can have the greatest attacking structures and defensive systems known to the game, but if your players don't understand and don't carry out the principles of play, those systems will fall apart. So thinking about how often do we give the opportunity for our players to contest possession at practice? Do we design games around go forward and providing support and reward them with points around those kind of skills? Do our players understand the principles of play and how one's a knock-on effect to the other? It's really, really important, and I'm happy to talk about that further too. Good to go. All right. Again, if I had my time again, I would spend so much more time on turnover ball. I think as a new coach, this is not normal, not abnormal. When a mistake happens, the first thing you're going to do is blow a whistle, bring everyone in, have a chat. That's a learning opportunity lost. And that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. I had Nick Hill on the podcast. Episode 42, and he researched 3,000 tries across various levels of games, and 42% of them come from turnover ball. It's the highest. Strike plays off lineouts, I believe, is the second, but that's a massive amount of points that we're open to in turnover situations. So think about that as coaches. How do we practice for that? How do we design our games around that? One thing I do now is I don't blow the whistle anymore. I give double points for tries scored on turnover ball after within 2 phases, and then if it's not scored, then I'll stop. And if we need to talk, we do. If not, we keep playing. The philosophy of having defense as that concept of get the ball back. We want to put ourselves as a team in as many turnover ball opportunities as possible. So if we're looking at defense as just stopping the team, as opposed to defense as we're going after that ball because we want it in under 4 phases, that's a totally different mindset, and designing games around that's really important for me. And then also thinking about counterattack. Counterattack's a nice, friendly turnover ball situation here. We're kicking you the ball, come at us kind of thing. So how often do we incorporate that into our practice sessions is something to reflect on. Thanks, Nathan. Number 6 should be number 1. Culture is everything. Every team has one. It's just whether you as a coach, if that's the culture you want as the team you're leading and overseeing. There's a variety of methods of doing it. It can be very top heavy. It can be player led. It can be just organic. It just happens. Some of the best teams in the world have had that. I'm a massive fan of Ray McLean. His method, that's why I had him on episode 8. I was pretty excited to get him on early doors. And his process is, have the players create a trademark, build some behaviors around that trademark, elect a leadership group who exemplify those behaviors, and then players peer reviewing each other around those behaviors to make sure it's not just a fancy slogan that's written on paper and left in the change rooms. They're peer reviewing that on a session by session basis to keep it a living thing. Tuckman stages of group development. Anyone who's done any NCCP stuff would have seen this in there: forming, storming, norming, performing. Ray McLean's method follows that perfectly. The storming stage can be pretty awesome. Just hang on, but don't give up on the process, because that norming, performing stages, they're my favorite parts of coaching. Next one, thanks. And these are just a couple of examples of stuff I've done. This was with the Montreal Irish 2 years ago, I believe. Their trademark was work hard, have fun, win. We created a bunch of behaviours around things like practice, during game, post game, those kind of things. These were all designed by the players. I just facilitated this process, and then they're the behaviours that they're peer reviewing their teammates on. And I'm happy to talk about that process as well. Next one. Better still, coaches should try and find Ray McLean's book there in the bottom row in the middle, Any Given Team. It's mandatory reading for the course. And there's a couple of pictures there of some peer review sessions that I've done in previous teams. And then bottom left of the screen, symbols are also really powerful. This was the Quebec U20 team about 11 years ago. And they came up with a trademark that they wanted to rebuild Quebec Junior Rugby. So I gave each player a house brick, and they had to carry it to every practice and game. And we tied it into the theme. We did some pretty cool stuff with that. So something to think about there as well. All right, thanks. And then the last one is for me is scoring points. I think this is a really powerful way of developing skills, decision making, and really giving immediate feedback to your players and to your athletes. Big shout out to Rusty from the Magic Academy, 100% stolen from him and just adapted to my context. But basically the idea here is you're focusing on what the players can do, as opposed to giving them feedback on what they're doing wrong. Which is a natural inclination for coaches. You want to make it competitive, but obviously we've got to keep it age appropriate in those regards. And then what you're doing is you're creating games that elicit the skill that you want individuals to perform, and then you're scoring points on them. You're rewarding them for doing it. So that's so broad ranging, and again, that might be some questions that come up. And I just think it's great. It provides immediate feedback for the coaches, players. I have it during the game as well. I have injured players on clickers, tracking stuff that we can do really well, and I just think it's a way to really put a bit of excitement into the process and get them really up for getting better at their skills and their processes. And then the last one, I think it is. And then for me, this has all been informal development for me. And the good news for coaches is you don't need to run a podcast to develop informally. It's a massive amount of work, so not everyone's up for that kind of stuff. But what you can do is you can constantly developing yourself informally. Building your network on social media, reaching out to other coaches, contributing and participating in conversations, whether they're online or offline, listening to some key podcasts, watching some great webinars that are out there right now. Visiting other environments is really important, whether it be learning environments or sporting environments. Working with referees, I had a great experience 2 years ago with Fitzy and Jean-Louis out here in Quebec, and I wish I'd done that years ago rather than barking at them from the sideline. And I just think that goes a long way as well, not just upskilling you, but building community. Reflecting on your practice sessions, thinking about, do you have a process to reflect on your practice session, reviewing that before your next session and building from that. And then building your network locally. Go where the energy is. Who are the coaches who are keen? Create a community. It can be online. It can be meeting at the pub and talking about a few things. It can be post game, but at the end of the day, if you are seeking professional development as a coach yourself, that's really powerful, because it's intrinsic, the motivation. So that's where you're really gonna learn some great stuff and progress in your coaching. And then last slide, just a little the plug slide. for the pod. So if you're interested in going through some old episodes, the website's probably the best way. And there's the other social stuff, which I'm really bad at, but it's there.
Yeah,
cool. Thank you.
It's a struggle for everyone. Andy, thanks for sharing all that. For those who wish to get in touch with Andy, is this the best way to get in touch with you? Is through these avenues?
Yeah, 100%. If you go to the website, there's a contact tab there that that'll go straight to my email address.
Awesome, and I will share Beth and Jackie's email on the screen in just a moment. But first, we've got a few questions. So, Andy, one of the things that's come up just because you were just presenting here is, looking back on where you started as a coach, where do you think you would be now without all of the professional development that you've kind of given yourself in a sense, but that you've been able to accumulate through this podcast?
That's a good question. Good one for reflecting. I think being a phys ed teacher, I came in already into coaching already with a kind of base on how to deliver a session. But Beth might be able to correct me on this, but I think the research does say that you tend to coach like you were coached yourself. So I was definitely doing a lot of top heavy coaching. I'm shocked that I still have friends at the Montreal Irish, given my first 2 years of coaching there until I had my change. But I think I would have progressed. I just don't think I would have progressed as quickly. I've always been curious about the process, and I think it comes with being competitive as well. I want my teams to do well, but that's not my driving process of coaching. But I've always been a little curious and a little, inquisitive about these kind of things. So yeah, it would have come. I just, I've knocked on so many doors now. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose right now.
Yeah, 100%. It's some awesome content for those who haven't caught up with the Rugby Coaches Corner. Please do. A couple of questions here for the entire panel. So maybe Beth, we'll start with you on this one, and then Andy and Jackie, if you have anything to add, that'd be great. But Andy at one point spoke about matching your delivery with your philosophy when you get out to training. So how do you suggest people can assess that in terms of how they're actually doing as a coach in terms of matching those two things outside of simply personal reflection? What other avenues are there for a coach to be able to assess their ability to match their delivery with their philosophy?
It's first of all, it's a really great question and pretty deep. It's certainly, this is actually something we were talking about when I was doing some leadership module delivery with the Advanced Coaching Diploma program last month, and we talked about how to make sure their actions basically support the philosophy that we've chosen. And the big piece there is not only having a philosophy, but having a values-based philosophy. So making sure that we have very significant values that we understand, and we choose to guide our actions every moment of every day. Because as much as we think we're a coach when we're on the field, we're really a coach 24/7, and the research also supports that we, like Andy mentioned, we start to think like a coach all the time, regardless of what we're doing and maybe what context we're in. So number one is really grounding the philosophy and values and understanding the values and trying to live them. The next piece is if your values are really clear, and I'm happy to share mine, and looking at the collaboration is one, support and challenge. Those are the values that I really try to underscore in my philosophy. If your athletes can actually give those values back to you, then that's a pretty good way to understand that the way that you are coaching and the way that you are doing what you do every day, if people know that you love to challenge them, but they feel supported through the challenge, then you're probably being able to not only say you have a coaching philosophy, but you're also living it regularly as well. And sometimes using those words really clearly is helpful. In the Advanced Coaching Diploma program, so that's for folks who've been around for a while, that's the old level 4 and level 5 of the NCCP system. We talk about having a values-based coaching philosophy, but also having an elevator pitch. So every coach should be able to really be clear about what their philosophy is. And it shouldn't change based on the book you read, unless you want to change it, semi-permanently. So, and most of those decisions and values we have kind of are set by around age 24, 25 most of the time. So be clear about what they are, then ask your athletes what they think. Part of them may be the values that you come up with as a team, may be the values that you're trying to support as well, especially if we're looking at the culture piece that Andy mentioned as well. So building them into the mantra of the team, but also knowing yourself as a particular in your philosophy.
Awesome. Before I go to Jackie and Andy with that, can I ask you directly, Beth, how are some of the ways players have challenged you? If you were talking about players exhibiting that philosophy of your own or value of your own, how have they taken that on board and challenged you personally?
So instead of me challenging them specifically, like kind of coming back to me, I would say I love the fact that when we're maybe going through a new defensive system or a new attack system, and they go, well, why would we do it? Why would we do it that way? What about this? And you know, what we might do is we might go, hey, actually, based on the comfort level of our fly half, we might have to think about not kicking in this situation, or we might have to think about kicking in this situation, depending on the athlete. And maybe our leadership group says, hey, coach, you know, this isn't really working for the athletes we have, and co-creating as a group. So it's not just me as a coach pushing everything down, it's working with the group and making sure that we're all on board and can buy in.
Awesome. Jackie and Andy, anything to add around that measuring your success in matching your philosophy with your practice and training?
Jackie's on mute, so I'll go. I love and hate player surveys. You're always nervous when you get a player survey back. I think that's a really powerful way of. That was what you were going to say.
No, but I agree with the sentiment.
Yeah. I also think videoing yourself and recording your audio is a good way of doing it. And then I was listening to a rival podcast, Dan Cottrell, who I've had on the show. I was listening to a pod that he put out last week, and he was talking, or one of the guests was talking about having someone from outside of the sport they're not invested in any way in rugby. They might be from a different sport. They might be a teacher. They might know nothing about coaching. Having them come and evaluate your session and you know, give it to you straightforward what they're seeing and what they're feeling. I think that could be pretty powerful as well.
Awesome. Jackie, anything to add?
Only that there are some, I would say, pretty formal 360-degree feedback processes that exist out there, where you know, there are surveys and interviews with people in your immediate circle and people that you interact with, athletes that you interact with regularly. So there are definitely very formal things like that to undertake to really dive deep into your coaching behaviors. Things like that are done generally speaking at a kind of advanced coaching diploma level. But I absolutely think that filming myself and reviewing that film was hands down one of the best learnings and immediate feedback opportunities that I had to take a look and be like, oh, that's what I look like when I'm talking to that athlete. Oh,
love it.
Maybe I should, you know, control these a little bit better. So yeah, that's videotaping yourself. I would agree with Andy, is a huge one. Yeah,
it's amazing you guys spoke about the video piece. I remember as a young referee, even just listening to myself. I used to audio record myself early, and to hear the tone I would speak to players in sometimes, I was like, man, that's not going to build any relationships. It's awful. Yeah. I would end every sentence with right. And yeah, that didn't go over too well, so changed that pretty quick. And anyone who knows me probably knows I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky kind of guy, so it was a bit bizarre. Anyways, little anecdote. Quick question for you, Jackie, around training and education in smaller communities. So what is the plan for online delivery, notably in the context where you know, we have people in smaller communities, not necessarily enough to run a course per se, but you know, to keep people from having to travel long distance to larger communities. But the addition now with COVID-19 and some of the restrictions means that we're going to have to do something online. So it might be an opportunity here for you to give us a bit of a preview.
Sounds great. Yes, it is. We'll say that the silver lining of this whole situation, I would say, is that it's really forced us to take a look at the way we deliver courses and to act as quick as we can in revising and adapting some of that delivery. So we're certainly looking at, and we are adapting our content to be able to deliver significant portions of our, to start with, our match official level 1 and on the coaching side, community initiation, World Rugby level 1 courses online, and to really make that in-person session that we have really meaningful, really practical, really on the field, getting your practice in, especially around the big 5 contact areas of the game, just for quality assurance and that safety piece. In I guess response to the remote area comments, we're hoping that will help engage some more of those folks who maybe don't always have access to, or where we're not running big courses, of 20 coaches or 20 match officials. But we do need to develop rugby in those areas, so we can certainly engage those folks online and then look to have someone, to have an educator travel to those areas and make sure that we have the opportunity for that in-person session as well, to wrap up the training nicely. But certainly something that we are looking at rolling out in the next couple of months, so stay tuned.
Awesome. We have time for one more quick question, and Beth, if you don't mind chipping in here, it's around for coaches who aren't necessarily coming from a teaching background and who haven't, dived too deep into the whole pedagogical theory around coaching. What are some maybe key resources that people can take a look at? And I will try and maybe even put them up on the screen here real quick if you give me a couple of things to post.
Sure. I mean, we can probably post a bunch of podcasts, and I know Andy has tons of them, obviously his own as well. But I think if we're looking at a couple of things that could probably be the best things to start from, is maybe even some more of the popular books that are more looking at like The Culture Code by Dan Coyle, Daniel Pink is a favorite author of mine. He's written some great stuff. Drive is an excellent book by him. It's on motivation. There's another book that he's called When. It's all on the secrets of timing, of doing things well and when to do them. All sorts of stuff, and also some personal development pieces, like some of Brene Brown's writing. And she's also got a great podcast, and man, there's so many different great options. If you look at some other coaching specific resources, the International Council for Coaching Education, or Coaching Excellence, sorry, is a great source. There's also a coaching, I'm just forgetting the name of it. It's a Facebook group. I think it's just Coaching Science, that's run by Richard Bailey, who works for the ICCE, and is really well mediated and moderated by Richard and Wayne Tom, some other researchers as well. The UKCC also has some excellent information as well that's accessible, even though it's a UK specific area. We can still access it from Canada and just sign up. And yeah, there's lots of other stuff, and if people are looking for anything else that's specific, just drop me an email and I can certainly help you find something. My bookshelves are pretty full, so happy to share.
That's awesome. I appreciate the fact that there is a ton of resources. Hopefully that answered the question. For those who are taking a look in your chat, I'm hoping you actually get this, and please in the question box let me know yes or no. But I have put Jackie Tittley's email address as well as Beth Barz's email address for anyone who wants to get in touch with them. So they should all appear in a message for everyone. Hopefully you guys have seen that. And then if not, I can just add them on the slide real quick. So unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time. I'm gonna try and do that while we answer one more question, which is around would it be possible to look at Rugby Canada taking a look at not necessarily formal webinars, but professional development being delivered online, as well as courses. So outside of courses, is professional development going to be more readily available online, notably around stuff like the key themes, but not necessarily that?
I think that one might be for me, so maybe I'll chip in, and then I'll open the floor maybe to Andy and Beth, and maybe have them say what they might like to see for the future of professional development, because I'm always eager to hear from other people what they would like to see from us.
Sure.
I would say that these webinars, we're definitely looking at what the future is of them, beyond COVID-19. What will the appetite be for people to be online? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? And what are the topics? Do we want to reserve it to technical, tactical, or do we continue to look at all areas of the game and supporting and looking at athletes in the process holistically? So lots of questions to be answered. Unfortunately, I don't have a more concrete plan or answer at this point, but it's certainly something that we are looking at, seeing the success of these webinars. One idea that we are batting around is doing something that is online, but is where we're having smaller groups where people can be more engaged in conversation. So instead of doing more of a formal webinar presentation and just having a bit of Q&A at the end, maybe having groups of 12 or 15 coaches or people, referees, whoever, who can really dig into a certain topic and have a bit more of a conversation. So again, lots of different avenues, but certainly seeing the success of these webinars, it's something that we know we have to continue in some shape or form.
Awesome. Appreciate we're just over the hour. Andy, go ahead and finish us off, buddy.
I'll just add to that. I think good coaching is centered around the athletes, and good coach development is centered around the coaches. So I would say that it should be coming from the coaches what their needs are, and I'd also say fingers crossed, all things go to plan, and we have content coming out on a regular basis, but there's nothing to stop coaches developing it themselves within their clubs. I had a Zoom webinar with my club last week with 6 coaches on board. We're having another one in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, it's great to get it from the national body and from your provincial body, but have a crack at it yourself, and even if it's just to fire some topics at each other and brainstorm, you're going to come out of it the other end with some good content.
Awesome. Great, folks. Thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to talk in depth about some of the coaching opportunities and what it takes to maintain some of your coaching, and what some of the formal, informal, and different ways of picking up some of these pieces are. So I really want to say a big thank you to Andy Plimer and to Beth Barz for taking the time to put some work in and join us tonight. It was really much appreciated. Jackie, we do this for a living, but I appreciate the fact that you were able to also do this under the purview of your expertise, which is outstanding. I did add some of the contact information on this last slide. Sorry, Andy, for ruining your slide there.
It's okay.
I just want to remind everyone, we are under rugby suspension for the moment, but we will be back on the field very shortly, and we look forward to seeing you there. Next Thursday, we have Vanessa Zoris, the registered sports dietitian with the Canadian Sport Institute Pacific, who works with our senior women's team, who will be joining us with a couple of guest rugby players, and we'll wait for that announcement to come. I know who they are. I'm not telling you yet, but hopefully you guys can join us next Thursday for that conversation geared around nutrition for performance. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then we're going to finish off the month with Russell Earnshaw, and Jackie and I will be joining Russell to finish off the month of June. So looking forward to that. If anyone has anything further, please feel free to get in touch with our coaches or panelists. In the meantime, folks, have a great evening, and thank you once again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, folks.